Okay, great. We are live here with a special edition of Quantum Leap on Pacific time. We're actually Tuesday evening, but we have a guest, Phil Bedford, who's actually out in Dubai. So we had a compromise on the time and we decided to bring him on for a special edition of Quantum Leap. And I'm so glad we did. He's really a master of all things, business building, business networking, and just right in our wheelhouse with Corey and I, and right what we try to bring to this podcast. We're going to get to Phil in just a second. I just wanted to welcome my co-host Corey Knott. Made it from another remote location, but he is here. And Corey, if you don't mind just introducing yourself and saying if you do know Phil, or maybe a brief testimonial about the work that he does.
Hey everyone, Corey Knott here, business coach with Take Wing Coaching. And yeah, Phil and I were in the same company together. We just had Mike Macedonio on, as you recall, from Asentiv, and Phil was a very important part, and it still is, with Asentiv. And I think a mentor and just an all-around great colleague within Asentiv, and he's doing some amazing things there in Dubai. And it's always just inspiring to see what he's got going on, and his presentations were always the most fun of all of them. Not just informative, but fun and interactive, and involved lots of dancing. Maybe he'll talk about that.
Yeah, I saw that he's a salsa dancer, and actually have his bio. I'll say a couple tidbits and we'll kind of go off this, but I do want to give him a chance to chime in fairly quick. But he's an author, a speaker, and he runs a something called the Rebel Networker too. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into his bio as we continue, but I want to give him the opportunity to introduce himself and welcome him to the show live from Dubai. Phil, if you don't mind just telling us your story and kind of what you do as a business coach.
Yeah, hi everyone, and good morning, all the way from Dubai in the UAE. So it's my pleasure to be here. Phil Bedford, nickname is the Rebel Networker, and I've been in the Middle East now for 24 years, which actually means I've been here longer than anywhere else in the world, in my world anyway. So yeah, it's absolutely super to be here. Good to catch up with Corey and of course yourself, David. So I work with business owners, primarily small business owners is where my heart lies. My dad was one of those people who started his own small business and unfortunately fought as many do against everything that was coming up, and unfortunately didn't succeed. As a kid, I witnessed that, and what I do now is I have the pleasure, with all the skill set given to me by Asentiv and my own knowledge, on how to help small businesses succeed. And primarily I find, David and all listeners, is how much can we find some kind of balance as well in the process of doing that, some kind of harmony with the journey. So finding times for our family and selves as we do it. So that would be a brief introduction, I would think. I'm sure you're going to ask me a lot more that's going to get even more interesting as we do it. If I'm a little bit woolly, I do apologize. It's just gone 5 a.m. here, so my head is still waking up, and only one coffee has done the job so far.
Yeah, one coffee, that's just priming the pump. And I do have your bio. I know really anybody that comes highly recommended from Mike, the more I look at your bio and your resume, the more impressed I am. And I know there's just so many different kind of footholds to talk about with what you do in terms of the author. You have a real marketing mind, you're a business coach at heart. But I did want to just, if you don't mind, just introducing your company. Asentiv is such a unique company in the world out there, and the power that brings to entrepreneurs is really second to none for small business in particular. If you don't mind just telling us a little bit about Asentiv and what attracted you to Asentiv, and why that's such a great vehicle for your professional career.
What attracted me about Asentiv was really just a gut feel. I've been in, let me backtrack. I actually failed school, I should say. I left school with very little qualifications at all. Nobody told me I should actually study for exams, so I failed. and ended up putting myself back through college, washing up 6 days a week in a restaurant. So I ended up getting a civil engineering degree, but while I was at university, I realized that I didn't enjoy engineering. So when I left university, I sort of got into recruitment, worked in recruitment for 5 years in sales, later exhibition stand salesman, then real estate. And in all of these companies, somehow, I don't know how, but I ended up as the top salesperson. And when I say I don't know how, it's because they never put me through sales training. But somehow I was getting clients. At a point, probably about 2013, I got introduced to BNI, which of course I know a lot of people, is quite big in California. Met some of the fantastic members out there in my time. And at this point in time, I went, that's what you've been doing, networking. Okay, I get it. And at that point in time, I got involved with BNI as a regional director, launched a few chapters. And probably about 2 years in, the regional director for BNI introduced me to Asentiv. And they were looking at the time called the Referral Institute. And Referral Institute was looking to move into the region. And it was quite an interesting story, actually, David, because I must admit to being a little bit arrogant. I was sitting there thinking, well, you know, what's this Asentiv thing? I'm a BNI director. I've been a top salesperson. I've done it all through networking. What can they possibly teach me? And I remember sitting through conference and going, oh my gosh, wow. Yeah, I really don't know it all. I'm just scratching the surface. And I think what made it apparent was what Asentiv does is really, it works in the space of knowledge and application. If you were going to say BNI is a Ferrari in terms of helping a small business get clients, and then you've got a Porsche. So your Porsche is maybe your social media, and then you've got your four-wheel drive Nissan, Toyota, and then that does something else. So you've got this garage of tools to grow your business, right? Well, Asentiv is really the advanced driving course. It teaches you what car to take out when and how to use it. And in the process of doing that, you're around other people who are learning how to advance drive their cars. So that becomes a network in itself. So that's what Asentiv is. It really is that knowledge based on showing entrepreneurs how they can leverage and build their business, really, but through relationships. And I say I joined and I didn't understand because I didn't understand. There was just something in me that says, you know what, there's something here. And it really was a pivotal moment for me. Another big one, actually, reason for joining, you mentioned him before, Mike Macedonia. Mike, Dawn, Eddie were the key people I met at the time. And there's just something magical about those three that really attracted me. And that was another big factor, to be fair. As you said, anything Mike says is always worth giving time to. So.
Yeah, there's such a brain trust there. And I do feel like I've been just scratching the surface of some of this content and material that runs so deep and Asentiv, and you really have to just live it and, in your profession, and that's how you master it. And I still see that I have a long way to go, but I love to connect with people like you who have really been on that path, that same path, but are, 10 years, 15 years down the road from where I see myself headed. I know Dubai, you said you've been there for about 25 years. And I know that you said you were actually raised in the UK, or you spent some time there, but if you don't mind just telling us a little bit about that other professional journey of what brought you to Dubai and some of the unique things about Dubai as a business owner there, or somebody as a business coach who's building businesses in Dubai, because a lot of us in California or other places, we don't know hardly anything about Dubai except for the fabulous photos and things.
All right. So I actually came out on holiday. A friend of mine was an air hostess with Emirates. And I just needed a holiday. I hadn't taken one. I was living in Bristol in the UK, working in recruitment. Came out. One day I was out desert driving. So they have the four-wheel drives going out in the desert, and which was lovely, great fun. And what you do is at the end of your desert, when you go in the desert, you have to deflate your tires so they don't sink in the sand. And when we were at the end of the session pumping them up again, over an ice cream. I met a guy from Bristol, which is where I was living in the UK, well, very close to where I was living in the UK. So we got talking. He owned a business in Dubai, and didn't think much of it. But after I returned home, he chased me up, and he was looking to bring people out to work for his exhibition stand business. And I was in the UK, bored. Recruitment wasn't going anywhere, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's give it a go. So I moved out to Dubai. So I just came out on a wing and a prayer, really, and actually came out to discover that the contract I was on wasn't so good, and I wasn't earning a lot of money. And that was my fault. I forgot to do the conversion rate from dirhams to pounds, and it was quite a shock at the time. So what that did was encourage me to pick up my old hobby, which was teaching salsa. And so I taught salsa 3 or 4 nights a week, earned more money than I did in my day job. And that really launched my entrepreneurial journey, which hasn't stopped since. But you said, you know, what makes Dubai unique? And the list is truly endless. And number one, its location in the world. It's situated really bang in the middle for any country, you know, for Australia, the States, Europe, Asia. So it's close to getting to anywhere. It also has a business environment that's very conducive to development. So it's relatively easy to start a business. It's not cheap. There is a cost to starting business here, but historically it's been very there's been a lot going on. There's been a lot of, not in terms of support as we know in the UK, because in the UK you can start a business for next to nothing. Here you do have to pay, but there is a lot going on. There's over 200, I think it's over 202 nationalities living in Dubai. And because it's such a hub, it just attracts business. People want to be here. So we got a city for the media industry. We've got a city for the health industry. We've got a city for, you know, you name it, there's a city. So there's a lot going on. I always think of it very much as the tip of the spear, as it were. There's a lot happens. It happens very fast. And it's run by a family called the Maktoums. So it's very much an autocracy here. It is run by this family, which means, guess what? Things work really fast. And if they decide they want to stop something, they click their fingers and it stops. If they want to change the economy, it changes. So in fact, as we're on here now, when I first came to Dubai 24 years ago, we had a Thursday, Friday, and a Friday, Saturday weekend. There was 2 weekends. And so you'd actually have some kids on their weekend while the parents were working. So it was a little bit, it was in transition from the Saudi Arabian weekend, which was Thursday, Friday, to the European weekend. And it stayed for about 20 years on a, let me get this right, Friday, Saturday weekend. And we've just now moved to a Saturday, Sunday weekend. And they did that like, click the fingers, change. And it's like that in business. It's very exciting. We're now doing business with Israel, which of course hasn't been possible up to this point. So again, it's fantastic.
Great to hear. And I know there is one tidbit you mentioned to me on our scoping call about it's a sink or swim environment, and that if your business fails at some point, you can get deported or sent back somewhere if you're an immigrant.
Yeah, you got to have a visa to be here, so that when you work, you get a 3-year residency visa, which is renewable. And of course, if you're not working, you can't stay. So what that does is a very interesting business environment, particularly when we're looking at word of mouth, what we're doing here, guys, right? You know, so if you're in your hometown, you know, and you start a business, sooner or later, pretty much everyone's going to hear about it if you're in a small enough community, right? And of course, you can use the tools of Asentiv, you know, to speed that up. But pretty much everybody here is because they'll tend to stay in that environment, apart from the odd 1 or 2 that move. But here, you know, people will come in for 3 months, leave. They're here for 2 years, they leave. And so that word of mouth, it's harder for it to progress. Because every time a new person comes in, it kind of puts a stop to the whole word of mouth process. So on one side, it's really cool because you've got loads of new people coming in. We've got I think probably about 500,000 small businesses just in Dubai in a population of about 4 million. So there's a lot of potential, but there is a dynamic that comes with that.
Yeah, very interesting. I know there's an age-old debate in public policy about places that are good to do business, and I really see it in for us here in the East Bay. I see how grateful it is to be able to be excited about where we are and doing business and feel like you're in a unique and special place. I do feel that about the Bay Area. It sounds like you feel that way about Dubai too. And I know there are some things that um, can always be better in terms of like the cost of living here in the Bay Area is very high. But then the trade-offs more than offset that. But you do have to have these sound business principles, which, you know, somebody like you and Corey can provide. And I did want to just ask one more question before I turn it over to Corey about some of the results that your clients see from working with you in terms of maybe they're starting a new business, maybe they've been working a business for a while, but they're saying, hey, well, I'm working too hard, I'm not seeing that many results. Do you have any anecdotes or the kinds of things that you see that you can help people with?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I actually wrote a book called The 7 Deadly Startup Sins. And the reason I wrote the book was because I saw so many small business owners making the same mistakes again and again and again. And it's a little bit like your parents say to you, don't touch that, it's hot. And you go, oh. But the trouble is with business, of course, by the time we've made that, if we make too many of these mistakes because we don't want to listen, we don't have a business anymore. So I thought I'd write the book. And the book's actually turned into an e-course now, which is online. So that was really primarily for small business, for startups. But, you know, when you look at startups are still 5 years in business, right? You know, 5 years is still very much a startup. And, you know, I think that a lot of those errors, I would say, or things people could do better are inherent, whether you're a startup or whether you're 5 years in. And a lot of that comes down to, I think, the discipline of the business owner. You know, there's only two activities in business: making money and losing money. And most business owners get stuck on the losing money. And whether it's because lack of discipline or lack of organization or fear of sales or whatever it is, you know, we need to sort of really focus our time and energy on the making money activities. And again, you know, a lot of this is because, again, no one ever teaches you to be a parent, right? And it's the same with the business. You know, you come out of a corporate where you're very much looked after by the corporate, and then you go and launch a small business, and suddenly all that support's gone away, and everything's on you, buddy. And that's when the mistakes start. So I think one of the things that allowed me to be successful in Asentiv, and Corey was a big part of my support structure, you know, was the fact I was able to plug into a community of people who would share their mistakes, and they would share what worked. And so that enabled me. And I think that's what made the Asentiv franchise so powerful, was as a new entrepreneur at the time, I could plug into this, do this, don't do that structure, given with love, of course. And it increased the chances that I succeeded. So I'm, you know, 14 years onwards, I'm still here and still able to help other people. So, you know, that would be one of my tips. Whatever level you're at in business, is make sure you plug into some sort of support community and be humble enough to listen.
Yeah, great. And I'm going to turn it over in a second to Corey. I did have one comment. I was listening to an Audible earlier, and it said, was talking about an MMA fighter that during a fight, you can't afford to think about all the mistakes or the things that bring you down. You have to stay in that zone. And I feel like as small business owners, we have to just, you know, if you can have somebody that prevents you from making those mistakes, but we're going to make mistakes, we're going to make a lot of mistakes, but you have to actually stay in that zone and keep going, making money, not losing money. So I see how you almost, it's very hard to do that without a coach or some kind of network like you and Asentiv or the BNI network. And I've tried it the other way, and it's hard enough as it is with that network, but without it, I almost see it as almost impossible in a lot of ways. But if you have a comment on that, feel free.
Yeah, I did actually. I think it's important to say, you know, this is something that became very, very clear to me here in Dubai as well, because there are people here that start businesses with loads of money. So they'll do a startup, but they get investment from family, for example, tons of money. And then you'll get other people that start a business, but they're bootstrapping. The money's coming from their own pocket and they've got no experience. But the other guy with money often has a family structure where they've had businesses around them. So startups are not created equal. And one thing became very apparent to me is, you can choose what you just said, which is surround yourself with the people, get a coach, be humble, and start to learn how to leverage the business in a frugal manner, because you have to be frugal, which is what I did. But if you're not willing to do that, because a lot of people are not willing to do that, right? They don't want to invest in relationships. They don't want to learn. They don't want to have a coach, whatever reason. Well, there is another option. And there's plenty of people succeed the other way. It just costs more money.
Very well put. I love that anecdote. Corey, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about that. I know the BNI community was huge for me because I came out of it just starting my business because I had a skill and I could sell it and people needed it. And even today, I still get referrals for that because people need it. But, BNI kind of changed my perspective, and then Don and a little bit of Mike, but Mike was maybe a little less available at the time, helped me shift my perspective even more. And when I got involved in Asentiv, it was really that community that has allowed me to thrive, as it were. And Gail and I measure success less by money and more by what we get to do with our lifestyle. And that, Asentiv was very much about that lifestyle, and the community supports that. And you get kind of away from that mindset of it's all about making money and more about building community, building relationships, having the people around you that, lift you up. And so part of that kind of goes back to my why. And we heard a little bit about your why, Phil, or the emotionally charged connection, as Asentiv calls it. And you might want to share a little more about that. I don't know. But what I'd like to know is, why do you feel that it's important to have that connection to the why, to the purpose, and ultimately to the vision as well?
Yeah, cheers, Corey. I mean, interestingly enough, I've got more than one why, or more than one ECC, as it were. I think just to go back on that quickly, a lot of people know that Simon Sinek talks about the why. Okay, so he's done a lot of work on that why, but I think personally that doesn't go deep enough. The why, he talks about for example, the Wright brothers, they want to change, power, they want to change the world by doing powered man flight. Great, fantastic. But why? Why do they want to do that? Well, were they chained to a house and they couldn't leave or something? So what drove that passion? And you touched on mine. So a big part of mine was obviously experiencing my father in business, being away for a couple of years. But another part of mine, of course, is being bullied as a kid. I had a terrible time at school. I remember, when I was 15 years old, my parents said to me, right, you're 15, Phil, you're a man, you can have a birthday party. And they cooked a load of food, put a load of drink on the table. And my parents said, right, we're going to go out of the house. We're going to leave you. You've got all your friends, you've got the house to yourself. Woohoo! And so they all went out, and 3 hours later, they came back. And they walked in, and I was sat there in the corner all on my own with all the food and all the drink, and nobody came. And the funny thing is, as sad as that is, it was all my own fault because I didn't invite anyone. I was so nervous that they'd say, no, we can't make it, you're not good enough, that I just didn't invite anyone. And I thought, you know what, they'll hear from somewhere that it's my party and they'll just turn up because they love me, but I can't ask. And to me, that was very similar to small business owners. There's something holding me back. I don't know whether I'm too, I don't like sales, or I don't know how to do this, or I don't know how to ask for help, or maybe I'm just not good enough, imposter syndrome, whatever it is. But people are holding back, and it's, I cross-reference that with my father. And I think, I found there's too many people out there trying to struggle to find that balance. They need help, but they're not asking. As these days, as I have the pleasure of being on podcasts like this, being on stages with people saying, oh, thank you, Phil, for doing this. And, oh my gosh, my life's here. And without you, I wouldn't have done this. And, I got one of my clients has just been on Forbes 100 most influential women in the Middle East. And she turned around and she said to me the other day, Phil, when I met you, that was the pivotal moment, and you sit there and you think, that little bullied kid, he used to hide away at school and, stay away from the bullies, it's a big journey, and it's sort of making up for that in a way. And of course, I know my father's sitting there stalking me on social media going, that's my boy. And, aren't we just trying to make our parents proud, really? And you said to me, why is it important? I think business is tough enough already, right? Small business is tough enough. And the thing is, when you've got drama, when things are going on, when things are tough, if all you're looking at is the next paycheck, while it's important, if you've got a bigger vision and a bigger driver, you can sometimes see over those challenges, your vision goes further. But more importantly, and this is what Simon does say, it's very true. If you know your why and you can share that with other people that have had a similar journey. So other people who've been bullied at school, other people whose fathers struggled, they're gonna hear this and they're gonna go, God, you know what? I get it. There's a bond with you, Phil. And you'll feel that bond. And now you go and surround yourself by those people that have a similar feeling, a similar drive, a similar challenge. And you know what? Suddenly you've got a support structure. And it's so much easier to overcome troubles when you've got a support structure. Now, this goes back, I think, to, let's take the different direction. Originally, as cavemen, when we were way back in our evolution, everything was either food or we were its food. And so we became hardwired for threat, to recognize threat, and also to recognize safety. And the thing is, when we're threatened, we either fight, flight, or freeze, do nothing, run away, or fight. And so we're always looking for things that make us feel safe, right? So things that make us feel safe are people that like the same sports team. People that even wear the same glasses or look the same as us. Corey, I joke about the way we look. Anyone that's listening to this without the video, we've both got very, very well-shaped heads with not a lot of hair and glasses.
I'm just emulating you, Phil. I started out with hair, and then I'm like, I want to look more like Phil.
But the thing is, we talk about, rapport and that feeling of security. Now, when somebody's been through the same challenge at such a deep level, the rapport is magnetic. And that's what being a small business owner is about, right? How do you build a support structure of people who will climb over hot coals to help you and not want paying for it because they just want to help you in your journey? Now, you surround yourself with a ton of those people, and and here's the thing, you become one of them for someone else. That's the thing people forget. It's got to go both ways. And then, magic's possible.
Yeah, that's let me just make one comment, Corey. I think you put your finger on the difference of the approach of Asentiv versus if people don't learn these practices. It's that, by finding our own purpose and meaning, and we connect with other people with kind of this purpose and meaning, and it's such a rewarding way of living our life and doing business. And I was just so bored by the alternative that you really explained it so well there. And I know Corey and I are always trying to explain these things about what makes this referral marketing and this type of networking that we do so unique. And you really explained it better than I've heard it explained in some ways, or differently. Corey and I are so we
Phil does it well.
Yeah.
That's why he gets to be on the big stage and tell everyone what it's all about. Speaking of which, so what would you say are potential connections that you'd be looking for out there? How can we help you, Phil, with our reach? And I know there are geographic considerations, but
it's such a beautiful environment to hear that, and it's so this is what makes this whole referral marketing, relationship marketing, BNI Asentiv kind of mindset so refreshing, is that you guys would ask me that. you know. And it's have you ever noticed when you ask somebody that question and they almost fall over because they're so used to people taking?
Right. I don't hang
You
around
know?
those people, so I'm not even used to it
Yeah,
anymore.
exactly.
Isn't it right? And they just
That's
can't, you
true.
know, they can't believe it. So that's a great question. And actually, Gail helped me once. You wouldn't believe. So this was in the early days of Twitter. So I'm always looking for speaking opportunities here, particularly. And I'll never forget. Abu Dhabi's literally an hour's drive away from where I live. It's the sort of the capital of the UAE. And I'll never forget Gail actually messaging me from California saying, Phil, I've just been on Twitter and there's someone looking for a speaker in Abu Dhabi. And I was like, what is happening in the world where someone in California can pick up a tweet from an hour away from me on the other side of the planet? And she emails me to say they're looking for a speaker. I thought it was amazing. So is the fact that you can even ask that just shows, you know, the way the world works. So yeah, I mean, from my perspective, guys, there's two real things that would add value to me. One is always speaking opportunities, whether it's in a networking group or in a corporate. A lot of corporates, you know, I've spoken for companies, you know, like Cartier, Hard Rock Cafe. You know, a lot of corporates now are increasingly seeing the power of networking for their sales teams. So I quite often, you know, I'll do a day for them. But a big one for me is I'm in the UAE, but my responsibility is the Middle East. So I'm always looking for people in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Bahrain to come and take our powerful tools of Asentiv into those regions. And really do what I do there. And, you know, I don't believe it should be Phil over there. It should be someone else who's local, who's plugged into that community and wants to make a difference. So I'm trying to find, and particularly as most of them speak Arabic there, it would definitely be a good idea to find someone local. So, you know, if you know anyone in those regions, and by the way, there are expats in those regions as well. Sure. So if you know a business owner in those regions, that would be a great plug-in for me, just in case their network has, you know, somebody like me that could make a difference there.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I haven't really networked. It feels like I haven't done a lot of international networking lately. More in the UK. I've been catching up with a lot of people. Some interesting crossovers between some other things I'm doing in Asentiv UK. So,
well, it's an interesting world. Now I've put it out there. You know the way the old oh my gosh, I've forgotten the word for it now. Oh my gosh. Well, now I've sort of given you a target. I've been very definitive. Anyone you know who's in the Middle East, oh my gosh, I've forgotten what it's called. Oh, Corey, help me. Oh.
Anyone you know, your target market.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I say it every day.
The target market.
Coffee. Reticular activator. That's the way your reticular activator works, right? So when you're really specific on something, suddenly, you know, that's why, you know, when you, the minute you buy a car, right, a particular type of car, you see it everywhere, but you didn't before you bought the car, right? So now I've sort of mentioned when you see someone who you know is in those parts of the world, my part of the world, your reticular activator should go off and you should think of, hey, Phil, let me drop them an email and see if they know anyone.
Yeah, well, that's well put. I do think that, you know, if you match the frequency of what you want, you'd be surprised at what comes back once you are turned on to these tools and the ability to, I think that's what, you know, why, you know, a year or two ago, I probably wouldn't have even considered finding somebody in Dubai for this broadcast. But once you understand how the geography doesn't really matter, it's about the person and the beliefs and the connection, that we can connect with people all over the world who can help us bring connections in our own neighborhood, or maybe the connections halfway across the world that are beneficial to us. So, you know, we may not know somebody right now. We may meet them next week, or somebody listening may know somebody. So we will put the contacts for you, Phil, and so great to hear more about you. We look forward to maybe having you back on at some point after our break.
Well, it'd be my pleasure. I mean, I just looked at the time there. I can't believe it's just shot by. On another note, David and Corey, and anyone that's listening to this, one of the things that COVID has done is obviously, I think, open up online networking, which really didn't exist in the way it does. And I run a number of Zoom networking events in the UAE. And because it's Zoom, anyone can jump in. And I've had people even coming in from California at times. They got to get up early, but or go to bed late, one or two. But if anyone ever wants to come and network and they're looking to do business in my region, you know,
Sure.
you've now got a channel that they've just got to contact me, mention, you know, your show or either of you guys, and I'll do what I can to help.
Yeah, I once got invited to go to Dubai to teach a basic HTML course, and that was back in 2003. And it was paying like 5,000 plus all expenses for the week, which was a good fee. But then I found out it took them about 6 months to pay, and I couldn't afford to make it. But you know, I mean, it's always worth paying attention to what's going on out there. There's lots of opportunity. So go to Phil's networking. That's what I suggest.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, I follow you on the social media, so I will share that, and I'll keep an eye out for the events that you have coming up and keep in touch that way. So, and if you are ever out in California for whatever reason or in the States, give us a holler. It'd be great to see you. So, thanks for joining us, Phil and Corey. Thanks you for coming out, and we'll leave it there for today. If you have any closing remarks, you guys go ahead. Otherwise, we're going to end this broadcast here.
No, great to see you, Phil. Thank you for being on.
Yeah, super to see you again, Corey. David, thanks for having me, and it'll be my pleasure to come back. I feel like we've only scratched the surface, so there's a lot more going on inside this little head yet. So thank you, everyone that's on here today, and it's been a pleasure.
I know. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.